Welcome to Chats with Changemakers, the Northeast podcast for people making the world a better place. Hi, and welcome to Chats with Changemakers. I'm your host, Kate Duffy, and in this episode, I spoke to Kelly Henderson of Addressing Domestic Abuse CIC. So, as it sounds, this episode is going to come with a bit of a trigger warning. Kelly talks about both domestic abuse and about murder. So if you're not in the right headspace to listen to this, now's your opportunity to switch off, maybe come back at a different time, or just find a different episode that's going to be more suitable to where you're at today. So a quick introduction then to Kelly. Kelly started her enterprise in October 2021 and has since worked on 5 pretty big evaluation and research projects which aim to influence policy related to domestic abuse. She's delivered training to around 25 housing providers, charities and other organisations who are working with tenants, and she's delivered several free learning opportunities across the Northeast. Her national event brings together academics, practitioners, survivors, and policymakers to make meaningful steps towards helping survivors to access the support that they need. And that's all done in the Northeast. So Kelly works nationwide, but that national event takes place here in the Northeast. So she's done Sunderland, she's done Durham. I'm hoping Newcastle is going to be next. So let's go to that interview with Kelly. Hello and welcome to Kelly Henderson from Addressing Domestic Abuse CIC. So welcome, Kelly. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Likewise, really looking forward to this.
Okay, so this topic it's going to be a chewy one today, isn't it? So before we get into the depths of this, tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a social entrepreneur. What led you there?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I've always kind of worked somewhere and I've always kind of liked working at places where I felt really part of it. The vision and the values was kind of me. And if you cut me in half, the vision and values of that organization would be me. So I would think that in my um, years of working in various different roles and different organisations. And that was always something really important to me. I had the chance to go on secondment to Northumbria Police to do a fantastic Home Office funded multi-force project. And it was just so brilliant and exciting. And I was loved it. And then when I got back to the organisation that I'd gone on secondment from, I was made redundant. So, and at the time, I was like, I'd already been looking for other jobs, do you know what I mean? But again, I was looking for a job where I would be part of that organisation and would, the vision and values would really speak to me. And I think so. I got back, I got made redundant, and then I was like, oh, okay, right, I'll look for another job. So I looked for another job, got another job in London, got a couple of jobs in London actually. And while that was great, obviously I live in Durham. While that was great, it was in lockdown as well. So it was quite a good time to be made redundant because I could get jobs in London where I only needed to be there kind of overnight once a week type of thing. So I was doing that and they were kind of temporary jobs. And in the middle of all of this, I was looking for other jobs. And I never felt as if there was a job or an organization that I was like, oh, I'd love to work there. I really want this job, which I had felt in the past. And then a couple of friends and colleagues of mine, Lucy and Karen from Positive About Inclusion, we were all made redundant at the same time, and a few other women as well. And they'd set up a community interest company, and I'd done a lot of work kind of within the third sector as a partner. And so I didn't really know a lot about kind of community interest companies. And then they'd set up and they were, really enjoying what they were doing. And then they said, well, why don't you kind of do something similar? And I was like, oh no, I can't do things like that. That's not for me. I always work somewhere. And then the more that kind of was going around in my head quite a lot, thinking, well, if I can't find the most ideal job that I feel really passionate about, because I've got to feel kind of really passionate and really driven to do something. And then I thought, oh well, maybe I'll give it a go. So I was working for a property repairs company at the time, and I thought, oh well, I'll just register and then I'll see what happens. So I'd looked into becoming a community interest company, and the bit that I liked about it was kind of making a difference, and it felt kind of it spoke to my values, and I would be doing work that I want to do, but I would also be kind of doing something in terms of the community as well, in its wider sense of I work in domestic abuse, but also kind of locally as well. So I decided that I would kind of do this, and then I was still working at the time. And then a few months later, I left that job and I was just solely addressing domestic abuse. And so that was a big kind of a big change, and it was a bit, well, it was a bit scary when you've always worked for kind of a I'd always worked for pretty big organizations as well, with a big IT team, big HR team. So then it was just me, and thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So it felt really scary at first, but I knew I'd done the right thing, because I knew that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do work that I want to do. And so yeah, so I suppose that's how it's set up. And I think as well, if I hadn't been made redundant, I probably would have just, coasted along and doing what I was doing, maybe applied for other jobs, but I never would have had that kind of, meeting, well, obviously knowing Lucy and Karen and what they'd done, I would have never been in a position where I could actually pursue that.
Hmm.
So I think doing a series of temporary jobs, and I got lots of experience, and I really enjoyed the work that I did, but I knew that I wanted to do something different. So, I was kind of, um, I was over 50 when this happened. So, having a lifetime of always working somewhere. And so it was a bit of a change, I suppose, later in my life. And I think that's one of the important things for me. Obviously, everybody's different. Was, maybe 20 years ago, I wouldn't have done this.
Interesting.
Um, I wouldn't, because you're in a different position in your life. So I wouldn't have done that then. But it felt like if I don't do it now, I'm never going to get the chance to do it. So I think timing is often important.
Mhm.
So I think a kind of a series of events of being made redundant, not seeing anything on the horizon, which I was like, oh my goodness, I really want to do that. And then speaking to Lucy and Karen, and just thinking, okay. And I think it's always good when somebody and you
Mhm.
see how they're doing, and they're really honest about things as well.
Yeah, for
So they
sure.
weren't just going, oh, everything's brilliant. It
Hmm.
was like, well, we did this and blah, blah, blah. And you can get this support from here. So I think having that support from peers
Hmm.
was really important as well.
Interesting. So you've had this huge career, you've done all these amazing things. What is it that made you pick domestic abuse as the topic that you were going to take forward and start to champion within your social enterprise?
Yeah, well, I'd been working in domestic abuse, within the housing sector, within police sector, and also in local government as well. So I'd crossed across various sectors, and I remember over 30 years ago now, God, I did my university placement at a refuge, and for me that was kind of the starting point. But the reason I chose to do my placement at a refuge was that I'd never really been affected by domestic abuse, until somebody who was close to me was actually murdered by their ex-husband. And so from there, I want to kind of know all about that. And when it's somebody close to you, you think that you want to do something, you want to kind of make a difference in the world, and you don't want other women to go through kind of what this person close to me went through. So I kind of made my decision then at university, over 30 years ago, that I want to do something to make a difference. And out of something bad, you can do something positive. So I think, for me, it was going to work in a refuge, finding out what I could do, the difference that I could make. Um, and it'd been really uplifting. And my job there was, while I was on placement, was to accompany women to present as homeless, and just hearing their stories. Be woken up to present as homeless, hearing their stories, hearing about kind of what the issues were, what the problems were, and how all the things that we needed to overcome. So I suppose for me, it was out of something obviously terrible, but knowing that if I could do something about that, that would be my drive, which has obviously sustained me, up to 30 years later, that I'm still feeling that every day I think I'm doing something, or I'm trying to do something that's going to make a difference. So I think that's an important driver, where out of something horrible you can do something which actually feels quite uplifting and positive, and it's kind of your drive to keep going, and know that you can keep going, you can keep making a difference. So I think for me it was that.
I'm so sorry that happened. It's a really tricky subject, isn't it? Domestic
It
abuse.
is. Yeah.
And it sounds to me then that you've spoken to a lot of people and you've walked that path with a lot of people that
Yeah.
have had that experience. Do you think that that helped you design your response, your interventions that you now put on? Like, what was the gap
Yeah.
that you were able to identify that has meant that your social enterprise can continue to make a difference and hopefully make things better moving forwards?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I remember is talking to women 30 years ago, walking to present as homeless, and things that, and afterwards on the way on the walk back to the refuge, hearing how they were made to feel when they were presenting as homeless, like they were, they were a kind of a problem. They were not treated with respect. They were kind of just pushed aside, and so back in 2022. I did a little piece of research of talking to women again in the Northeast about how they were made to feel when they presented as homeless. And it was quite telling that some of the women talked about said even some of the same words that I'd heard 30 years ago. So
Crikey.
it's just really scary that we might have seen lots of laws change, lots of new kind of developments around domestic abuse, but if we are still in a position where women feel the same presenting as homeless, then we've got a problem. And I want to be part of that solution. So I think doing that piece of research, obviously, I wasn't funded to do it. I just want to do it to say, this is how women in 2022 are feeling when they present as homeless. So, yes, we've had the Domestic Abuse Act. Yes, we've had the Homeless Reduction Act. We've had all of these things. But actually, the bottom line is women are feeling like this.
Mm.
So I think I would just want to do that piece of research. So a lot of the work that we do is around research, evaluation, training, policy development, working with a lot of our works with housing providers and homeless housing option teams. So I just wanted to always remember that everything that we do needs to be inspired by survivors. So, and not inspired by kind of what services want, what big organizations want, but we need to be informed by the voice of survivors, and then we can actually change things. And things are going to take time to change, yeah, and I'm really impatient about that. But I think just to keep going and just to keep saying, well, actually, this is how women are feeling. So why are our services not picking up that? Why are we not doing something about that? So I think just always be mindful, I suppose, of what survivors are experiencing and the research that we carry out, the kind of the training that we're carrying out, just make sure that the voice of survivors is in everything that we do, everything. And so a lot of the training that we do would be, informed by survivors' experiences. So if you're, a housing provider, you will get to hear of what survivors have felt and how, maybe some of the responses that you've been involved in have made somebody feel. And then once you can hear from the other person's point of view, and I'm really conscious that, having worked in housing, haven't been a housing officer, that I think housing is a brilliant profession. I loved it. I still love it. And I'm a board member now for a housing organisation. I just feel so passionate about being a housing professional. And I think that people enter into housing because they want to make a difference. But sometimes you only know what you know, and it's like that quote, isn't it? Kind of, do what you do until you know better. And I think when you know better, when you've heard the voice of survivors, then you can do something about that. So for me, that feels really important, and I think that's the exciting part of what I do. That we're hopefully going to make incremental changes.
Mhm.
I'm one person. I'm not going to kind of change policy and legislation this week, maybe next week. But it's just knowing that being driven by the voice of survivors and getting that voice into all of these organisations
Mhm.
is really important.
I completely agree with you. I think that any organization that is set up almost on behalf to act on behalf
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
people in this way, you have to be led by those voices. Um, I'm interested, Kelly, because this really is a difficult topic. Like what systems, processes, like what do you have in place to look after you in terms of dealing with this as a topic day in, day out, especially if you are so focused on survivor testimony and experience? Because I can imagine that that can be quite a weighty thing to be working with.
Yes, it is. And I think that's why it's really important to be surrounded by good people.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of, I've got an advisory board, so I've got three really great people on the board. So I've got somebody from Durham Business School who's an assistant professor in accounting, and I've got somebody who's a chief
Handy.
executive of very handy. I've got somebody who's a chief executive of a housing provider in Scotland,
Mhm.
who was my previous kind of manager, who's really inspirational, brilliant, and just a brilliant people person and always has your back. And then I've got my other old manager from the property company in the private sector that I worked in as well. So three women who really championed me, supported me, and have my back. But I've also got kind of, I think, working in the housing sector, working with the housing sector, I think there's always just some brilliant people who are kind of always there. You can pick up the phone or you can, drop them a text or whatever. So I think it's really important to kind of have that really great network around you. And I've already mentioned Karen and Lucy. They must think they're on commission here, but other kicks as well, other people who know what it's like. So yes, they deal with their work is around equality, diversity, and inclusion. So I think obviously, somebody who's passionate about their subject as well. So reaching out to people, just, when you're having a bad day, just going, oh God, well, I've had a really bad day. Or when you've done something that you're not like thinking, oh, I've done a really good job there, where you're thinking, oh, I could have done that better. Because this
Mhm.
happens to everybody.
Mhm.
And it's no good thinking that everything you're going to do is going to be perfect and brilliant. If only it was. So when you're having one of those days, just being able to pick up the phone, go for a cuppa with somebody and say, you won't believe what I've done. Oh my goodness. And
Yeah.
then somebody's saying, oh, well, I can beat you there. And having those kind of conversations and
Yeah.
just, has been really useful. And I think having the support that I've had, obviously, from Junction Point yourself, um, and the Business Innovation Centre, the support I've had from people who are experts in the kind of social entrepreneur field, but
Mhm.
also the friends, the colleagues, people who work in housing, in domestic abuse, being able to just to have that network of people. So for me, having a network is the most important thing of being a social entrepreneur. It's having a network that you can trust, that you can be honest with as well. So you know what it's like on social media, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, especially LinkedIn, where everybody's like, had a fantastic day today. I'm delighted to be doing, and I'm one of those people who puts all
Mhm.
of this on LinkedIn as well. But I think sometimes when you see somebody being really honest on LinkedIn, saying, "Oh, I've had a really bad day," and that always makes me go, "Oh, that's a really good thing to do, isn't it? To
Yeah,
kind of be to
definitely.
be vulnerable is really good, and say that you don't know everything.
Mhm.
So I think networks, people with totally different experiences, and different knowledge sets to you as well, I think is really important.
Well, Kelly, I feel like you've jumped ahead to our final
Oh,
question in relation to
that's
like the
me.
top tips, if you like,
All right.
along the way, because there's
Yeah.
oodles in this in terms of the right timing, in terms of being led
Yeah.
by participant voice, in terms of having the right network and the connections around you. So I'm going to ask you a different question. I'm going to ask you
Okay.
to tell us about perhaps a challenge that you've had to overcome as a social entrepreneur or as an individual trying to make a change in the world. So tell us about a challenge that you've overcome, perhaps some tips around how.
Yeah, I think sometimes choosing the right projects as well. I think that it's really important. So you might like the look of something, but then being realistic, can you do it in the time scale? Can you do it in the way that you want to do it? I think is kind of really important. So just recently, kind of finished a piece of work which was quite tricky. And I think just constantly learning from that as well, to go, well, next time I would do this differently. I would do that differently. So I think having that growth mindset, thinking that something's not always going to be perfect. You might do a piece of work, it might be really frustrating. But just think, well, what did I learn from that? What would I do differently? And I've recently went to I think I sent you a picture of the book, the Sarah Davies
Mhm.
session, and I found her book is I found kind of really it's kind of a 6 minute entrepreneur. And I found that kind of really interesting about that, having that growth mindset. So sometimes you might feel something hasn't gone as well as it could have gone. It's been really frustrating to work on a project, over the years, when I've been involved in various projects. And I might think, oh, goodness. But I think it's always about taking something from that. What did you learn from that? What would you do differently? Because you can feel really deflated about something. And if somebody's been maybe as an entrepreneur, if somebody's maybe been difficult to work with, or an organization's been difficult or tricky to work with, through time scales, maybe the right people weren't around the table, things like that. And it can feel like you're pulling teeth, and it can feel really frustrating. But I always think, thinking about kind of Sarah Davies and thinking about have that growth mindset. Just think, well, what did I learn from this? What would I do next time? So I might have been involved, over the years, a couple of tricky projects where I've thought, oh my goodness, what have I got myself into here? But then thinking, okay, well, I'm going to take what I learned from that, and I'm going to kind of use it in the next project. So it might be, I'm going to really specify what the parameters are. But before I would just be like, maybe in my first couple of things, I would have been like, yes, whatever, yes. And I'm such a people pleaser as well. And it's something I have to kind of stop, just going, yes, whatever. So I think really protecting yourself and kind of your space as well. When you said before about needing, what do you do to kind of have that support? And I think protecting your space, protecting, being really firm with boundaries and parameters, I think is something that I've learned over the years. First couple of things that would have been whatever you want. Yes, I'll jump through 55 hoops. For not very much, funding that you're going to give me. So I think that's definitely what I've learned, being really clear from the outset what the client can expect, what you are going to do, what you're not going to do as well. So I think that's something that has definitely been a people pleaser type of person that I've kind of had my fingers burnt a little bit by that, but I've learned from it. And it's so, everything that you go through is a learning experience and that you can do something positive with. I think I'm a glass half full type of person. Out of horrible things, out of adversity, out of tricky working relationships, you can always get something from that. So just always treat that as kind of, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have learned that. So now I'm like, well, parameters of this, blah, blah, blah.
Amazing. Wonderful. Such brilliant advice. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of growth mindset. I think it's the only way to truly be able to make a difference, because if we think we've got it perfect and we're not interested in continuing to learn, it means that we're not open to the changing environment that we're working in. There's going to be moments where we can do things better or we've actually got it wrong, and we have to be open enough to be able to look at that and say, I got to do it better next time. Otherwise, there's no point getting off the start line if you haven't got that attitude of making a difference. So Kelly, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We're going to be sharing all of your social media and your links with everybody so they can connect directly with you. But please keep doing what you're doing. I think your organisation is making a huge difference, and I think the world is a better place for you doing what you do. So thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you.
So Kelly was extremely generous with her advice in this episode. But I think her biggest piece of advice was very much about getting yourself connected. So finding the right support network, finding other people who are out there that know what it's like, that understand your frustrations and that can keep you on the straight and narrow rather than being blown around with all of the beautiful, shiny versions of reality on social media. I really love this idea of having a group of critical friends that you can troubleshoot with, and that you can share those days that only other social entrepreneurs, that people who are leading change-based organizations can understand. Because leading organizations that have true purpose behind them, I think just comes with something a little bit more. There's something unique that builds us, that brings us all together. So I would really recommend, I would agree with Kelly that having the right connections, the right network around you is really, really important. It's actually something that I've developed a little bit more recently using action learning. I I would really recommend this if you haven't come across it yet. So if there's any funded support out there that gives you access to this, just go ahead and have a little go. It's a way of building a deeper relationship with maybe 5 to 7 peers. And you meet on sort of a semi-regular basis. And through a very structured process, you're able to offer each other advice and guidance and receive it in a way that is helping the challenge holder to come up with the solutions themselves. So it isn't just loads of people just going, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done the other? That you go away feeling bamboozled with all of the opportunities and different ways you could go, but rather being asked really carefully considered questions from people who may have experienced something similar to help you join those dots and get a little bit closer to the solution that you're looking for. So I would really recommend action learning sets if you haven't done them before. But as I say, I completely agree with Kelly. I think that building a strong support network is really, really important. And it's partly why we developed the Changemakers community. And it is, in fact, the purpose behind this podcast. So I'm hoping that through connecting with like-minded people, you guys are starting to build that network to both help get you closer to your impact, but also to support you as a real-life human, a person behind this amazing organization that also needs a little bit of support too. So don't forget, connect with Kelly and her social venture. And don't forget to subscribe to Chats with Changemakers to be notified of more brilliant interviews like this one. Catch you next time. Thank you for joining today's chat. If you'd like to be featured on the next series, please email hello@junctionpoint.co.uk. Speak to you soon.